So this is a disappointment, this debate, but it is not a surprise in terms of the priorities of this SNP Green government. And if you look at what's happened over the last few weeks, over the festive period, we had severe weather which caused significant disruption for many parts of Scotland, put massive pressures on resilience services, and in the run-up, if you will respect my right to actually respond to your opening remarks, Cabinet Secretary, just give me a couple of seconds. The point I'm making, which is absolutely clear in our amendment, is this is the wrong choice for our first debate this year. We should be focusing on the NHS. In the run-up to New Year, doctors in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde pleaded with the Health Board to declare a major incident, while NHS Grampian issued an appeal for all staff to come in. And when the Cabinet Secretary earlier this afternoon referred to NHS Lothian today, he did not acknowledge the long-standing deep issues in relation to underfunding, the lack of capacity which NHS Lothian has now and going forward with our increasing population, and crucially the lack of social care. And those were not issues that started through COVID, and in fact there were not even issues that started because we left the EU. They were in place long before that, and we know from repeated comments by representatives of the BMA that they are seriously worried about patient safety being put at risk every single day, and I will not be the only MSP that gets repeated references from constituents who cannot get through to the NHS and they end up going to A&E. Now, the SNP and Green MSPs voted against our Labour proposals to debate those issues today, and they opted for their #1 priority to debate the Constitution rather than tackling the health crisis and the cost of living crisis that is getting worse. Yes, I will, briefly.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the member for giving way. The member asks why we are talking about independence.
Dr Allen, could you please ensure your card's on and your microphone is on?
It is, yeah.
Your microphone's on? It doesn't sound like it. Well, the microphone isn't coming on, so maybe you could try another seat. Apologies to Ms Boyack, and I will reflect that in the time.
I appreciate that, Presiding Officer. The reason I'm mentioning this is because it's up to us to decide what we want to debate. And my view is that the choice of this discussion is more about internal SNP strategic discussions than it is about the interest of the country. Because we were told in newspapers in advance of this debate that we'd be offered a detailed blueprint for independence. And yet, what did the Cabinet Secretary do today? He gave us repeated interpretations of history from his perspective. He didn't talk about the future, and once again he offered us a false choice: the status quo or another divisive independence referendum. Now, we are not against constitutional change as Scottish Labour. Over our history we've advocated and delivered constitutional change. We delivered this Parliament, and not only that, but it's been strengthened since its establishment, and we have done that on a cross-party basis. We have been prepared to speak to people. Sorry, no, I've already tried to take one intervention. The constitutional change we want to see, because I want to focus on what we would like to see that's different, because we don't support the status quo as is. We want to empower people and communities, and where cooperation is key with nations and regions working together, that should be part of the UK's redistributive union. That does not need a divisive referendum. I'll take a brief intervention.
I thank Sarah Boyack for taking an intervention. If she says that she is respecting of democracy, but the policy that was put forward by her leader in August 2022 said that the role of the Scottish Parliament is to be the expression of the democratic will of the people of Scotland, and yet Labour's amendment today seeks to remove the section in the government motion that says that the UK should be a voluntary union of nations, something that her colleagues in Welsh Labour understand. Why is it that that has been removed if Labour support democracy?
I think you'll note... Cue applause. I think you'll note that we have retained the first half of this motion today because we do agree with the proposals, that we acknowledge there was a decision by the Lord Advocate, and we also acknowledge that we want to reaffirm our belief that people in Scotland have the sovereign right to determine the form of government that's best suited to their needs. And we took a decision on that in 2014. That is uncomfortable. That is uncomfortable. And since then, as I said in the opening comments I made, we have seen a change the devolution settlement. My disappointment with Donald Cameron today not acknowledging that the status quo is perfect. We need to change the status quo. We need change in Scotland. And the best way to do that is not to have an independence referendum. And I would say you were making a comment about what the voters think. If you look at opinion poll after opinion poll, even SNP since the election, even SNP voters do not want an independence referendum this autumn. And that is absolutely critical, because there's interpretations of exactly what the voters think. Yes, we are here to represent our constituents, and I am determined to do that, because we are working as Scottish Labour to look at how we change the UK, to make it a more radical UK, a more redistributive UK, and to build on devolution. With respect, Presiding Officer, I didn't heckle other people when they were speaking when I disagree with them.
Members, could we please listen to the Speaker who has got the floor? Sarah Boyack.
Gordon Brown's constitution, which Keir Starmer established, formed the basis of the choice that voters will have at the next election. And it is not a choice between the status quo or the SNP and Greens independence offer. At the next general election, we will have a choice in Scotland to boot out the Tories, to get rid of the undemocratic House of Lords, have a directly elected second chamber, to put in place the cooperation that in the last statement the Cabinet Secretary was talking about the need to do on energy and to tackle the cost of living crisis. And we would reform the intergovernmental working with joint government councils, with secretariats that are not appointed by both governments. There are changes. Now, these don't sound exciting to the SNP, but it is crucial. And I want to finish on this point, because the SNP has been a centralising government, taking power away from our local authorities and communities, and we are now seeing services cut in our local communities. It's time to reverse that trend, so it's not just about having more powers to the Scottish Parliament, it's to stop the hoarding of power by this Scottish Parliament, to devolve power to our councils, whether it's on education, on how they invest in critical services like healthcare, in terms of supporting our health system by having care and support.
I have given you an extra minute. Could you please wind up and move your amendment? Thank you.
There is a better future than the divisive binary choice that's been already highlighted by the SNP today. We want radical change. We want to give people powers to tackle the cost of living crisis.
Ms Boyack, please conclude and move your amendment.
Now, and that is the choice that we would offer at the next election.
Ms